You see the shroud in negative. Like, Jamie, pull up an image of it. It's very strange. Like it shows the lash marks on his body. It shows his facial features. It shows the holes where his wrist is, where he was crucified. The shroud was not a painting, not a scorch, or not a photograph. Barry Schwarz stared at the DNA report. In his shaking hands, a cold wave of disbelief settling in his stomach. After 4 decades of studying the Shroud of Turin, he believed he had seen every mystery it could offer. He was wrong. The genetic data pulled from the ancient fibers didn't align with anything they expected. It wasn't from medieval European handlers. It didn't match Italian restorers. It wasn't even consistent with people from Roman-era Palestine. Instead, the lab uncovered DNA markers from regions that simply didn't make sense. Sequences so strange that 3 independent geneticists refused to approve the final report. When Schwarz finally asked the lead researcher what they were truly dealing with, her response left a lasting chill. Barry, I honestly don't know. No one does. And to be truthful, some of my colleagues don't even want to find out. That's when Schwarz felt a deeper, more unsettling realization. The scientific community wasn't just puzzled by the evidence. They were afraid of it. But here's the thing. To understand why this DNA discovery is sparking quiet panic inside research labs, you first need to know how a deeply skeptical Jewish photographer became the world's foremost authority on the most controversial relic in history. Because what Schwarz uncovered over 4 decades of studying the Shroud of Turin is exactly the kind of evidence powerful institutions would rather keep hidden. After 3 years of intense research, our team finally published the findings in peer-reviewed scientific journals. And think about this for a moment. Whoever removed that burial cloth from the tomb risked everything. Taking it would have been as dangerous as standing beside Jesus himself. Roman soldiers executed people for far less. Now ask yourself, honestly, would you risk crucifixion just to save a piece of fabric from someone down your street? Or would you only take that kind of risk for someone you truly believed had defeated death itself? The very existence of this cloth suggests something powerful that history books rarely acknowledge. It all began in 1978. Barry Schwarz was a rising star in technical photography, the kind of expert NASA trusted with its most sensitive imaging work. So when a group of elite American scientists personally asked for his help in a confidential examination of the Shroud of Turin, his first reaction was disbelief. In fact, he nearly laughed. He was convinced it was nothing more than a medieval forgery, a clever painting made by a skilled artist. In his mind, he'd take the all-expenses-paid trip to Italy, find obvious brushstrokes within hours, and be back home within a week. A free European trip, mystery solved, career unchanged. He even joked about it at conferences, brushing the whole thing off with a sarcastic remark that would follow him for the next 40 years. But when he finally arrived in Turin, something unexpected happened. Something he never saw coming. There was something undeniably different about the image on the shroud, something none of us had ever seen before. It didn't resemble any known image from history. The team worked non-stop for 5 exhausting days and nights, barely sleeping as they ran one experiment after another on the ancient cloth. Schwarz carefully documented everything, every microscopic fiber, every strange marking, every impossible detail woven into the fabric, greater than, and slowly, almost without noticing, the color began to drain from his face. There were no brush strokes anywhere, no pigments, no trace of any known artistic method from any time in human history. The haunting image on the Shroud of Turin wasn't painted. It wasn't burned or scorched. It wasn't created with photography or any recognizable technology. By all logic, it shouldn't exist, and yet it did. Here's what makes it even more unsettling. Schwarz tried to walk away from the project twice. He told himself it wasn't his problem to solve. After all, he was Jewish. Why should he care about a Christian relic from 2,000 years ago? But the shroud wouldn't let him go. Something kept pulling him back. Then everything shifted when Don Lin entered the story. And that's where things took a darker, more mysterious turn. Lynn wasn't just another scientist with an impressive resume. He had worked on the legendary Voyager mission and the groundbreaking Galileo mission. He was one of NASA's top imaging experts at the prestigious Jet Propulsion Laboratory. When Don Lynn spoke, people listened. During one intense planning meeting, Schwarz finally asked the question that had been weighing on him. Why am I even here? I'm just a Jewish guy with no connection to any of this religious stuff. Lynn's calm reply hit him like a freight train. Jesus was Jewish, too, Lynn said, plainly. Then he leaned closer, lowering his voice. Maybe God wanted one of his own people on this team. Schwarz felt a chill run up the back of his neck. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, and Lynn wasn't done. He told Schwarz to go to Turin, give his very best professional work, and trust that a larger purpose would reveal itself in time. Those simple words changed everything. He had no idea he was stepping into a mystery that would consume the rest of his life. Later, Schwarz would admit something unsettling. He began to feel that many Christians weren't being told the full truth about the Shroud of Turin. But the shocking image analysis was only the beginning. Over the next 3 intense years, the team ran every scientific test they could imagine. Their goal was simple: expose the cloth as a fake, publish the results, and move on with their careers. Instead, they hit one dead end after another. No paint, no dyes, no burn marks, no photographic chemicals from any era, nothing that could explain how the image was formed. And here's the part most people miss. They didn't just fail to identify the method. Through rigorous peer-reviewed research published in major scientific journals, they demonstrated something far more troubling. No known technology from any period in human history could reproduce an image with these characteristics. Let that sink in. Humanity can land advanced robots on Mars. We've mapped the entire human genome. We can split atoms, and yet we still cannot recreate the mysterious image on that cloth using any modern technology. When the team finally released their full findings, the reaction from the wider scientific world was eerie. Not outrage, not debate, just silence. No major rebuttals, no decisive pushback. Just a quiet that felt deeply unsettling. No serious academic efforts emerged to challenge or dismantle their careful research. Instead, there was a strange, uneasy silence. No major debates, no strong rebuttals, just discomfort. Almost as if someone influential didn't want the conversation to go any further. And this is where Schwarz's story becomes deeply personal. Because even after seeing all that evidence with his own eyes, he still refused to believe the Shroud of Turin was real. For 18 long years, he resisted the very conclusions his own research pointed toward. The reason? Blood. The stains on the cloth still appeared red. And anyone with basic forensic knowledge knows that dried blood usually turns dark brown within hours of exposure to air. That single detail kept Schwarz firmly grounded in skepticism. To him, it seemed like undeniable proof that something wasn't right. But everything changed in 1995. After years of inner resistance, Schwarz received a phone call that would completely reshape his understanding of the Shroud. On the other end was world-renowned blood expert Dr. Alan Adler, and he had the answer to the one question that had kept Schwarz from accepting the cloth as authentic. On the other end of the call was Dr. Alan Adler, a Harvard-trained biochemist, a globally respected expert in blood chemistry, and like Schwarz, a Jewish researcher with impeccable credentials. When Adler spoke about blood evidence, governments and major institutions paid attention. "Barry," Adler said, his usually calm voice tense and serious. "The blood samples on the Shroud contain extremely high levels of bilirubin, far higher than normal." Schwarz paused, confused by the technical term. "What does that mean, Ellen?" Adler explained carefully. "When a human body experiences extreme prolonged trauma, brutal beatings, severe whipping, punctures from sharp thorns, and ultimately crucifixion, the body goes into shock. In that state, bilirubin levels rise dramatically. The liver becomes overwhelmed and can't process it fast enough. Blood saturated with high bilirubin stays bright red. It doesn't darken over time." Schwarz felt a chill. His mind raced back through years of research. The answer had been right in front of him for nearly 2 decades. He simply hadn't had the biochemical knowledge to interpret it. In that moment, the last of his doubts collapsed. The Shroud of Turin wasn't just possibly authentic. It matched exactly what it had always been claimed to be, the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth. But what came next was even more unsettling. Because the most disturbing part of the investigation didn't come from imaging or blood chemistry. It came from genetics. This is the part many in mainstream science rarely discuss openly. When researchers finally extracted usable DNA from the shroud's ancient fibers, they expected something ordinary. Centuries of contamination. European handlers, medieval monks, Renaissance restorers, Italian conservators. But that's not what they found. The genetic results were deeply puzzling. The sequences revealed clear markers from multiple, completely different regions of the world. There were Middle Eastern traces which made sense, but there were also unexpected markers from South Asia, North Africa, and other ancient populations that shouldn't all appear together on a single cloth, believed to come from 1st century Jerusalem. And here's what unsettled researchers the most. The patterns didn't look like random contamination from centuries of handling. They were too specific, too geographically distinct, and too intentionally distributed across the fabric. Yet that position sits uneasily beside the evidence. Blood chemistry indicating extreme physical trauma, an image formation process no known technology can replicate, and DNA results that raise more questions than answers. It almost feels as if the conclusion came first and the evidence was expected to fall in line. But the data hasn't cooperated with that narrative. For years, alternative ideas have quietly circulated among researchers. Some scientists in private discussions mention genetic markers that don't align with any known population databases. Others talk about sequences that appear fragmented or unusual in ways that don't match normal biological aging or degradation. What's changed is that skeptics aren't always offering firm counter-explanations anymore. In some cases, they're simply avoiding the topic altogether. Perhaps because fully engaging with the DNA evidence could open doors to questions mainstream science isn't ready to answer. What if the genetic data suggests the cloth is older than we think? What if the anomalies point to gaps in our understanding of ancient human movement or history? And what if some experts have wrestled with these possibilities quietly for years, unsure how the public would respond? These ideas aren't always coming from fringe voices. In some cases, they emerge from ongoing debates and unresolved questions that continue to surround one of the most studied relics in the world. These aren't wild speculations. They're serious questions raised by credentialed researchers in private professional discussions, the kind of uncomfortable conversations that rarely make it into peer-reviewed journals. After seeing how easily public perception could be shaped by sensational headlines, Schwarz grew deeply concerned. Many media reports about the Shroud of Turin were misleading and some were outright false. So he made a decision that would define the rest of his life. In 1996, he built Shroud, come from the ground up. Over time, it became the largest and most comprehensive scientific archive dedicated to Shroud research. Anywhere in the world, millions of people now visit it every year in search of reliable information. Remarkably, the site was thriving long before Google was even a household name. Schwarz refused advertising. He turned down sponsorships, no corporate funding, no commercial influence, just raw scientific data freely available to anyone willing to examine it honestly. Then in 2009, he took things further by founding the Shroud of Turin Education and Research Association as a non-profit. Its mission was simple: preserve the evidence and make it accessible for future generations of researchers. Over the years, many people questioned his motives. Why would a Jewish man dedicate his life to protecting controversial evidence connected to Jesus? His answer never changed. It was always simple and direct. "My job isn't to tell people what to believe," Schwarz often said. "My responsibility is to make sure the scientific evidence survives." But there's a deeply personal side of the story he rarely shared in interviews. The investigation didn't just shape his career, it changed him as a person. After decades of presenting his research around the world, something shifted. People stopped asking about the Shroud of Turin itself. Instead, they began asking him a far more personal question. "What do you believe now, Barry?" At 50 years old, for the first time in his life, he had to face a question he'd been avoiding since childhood. He was raised in a strict Orthodox Jewish home, surrounded by extended family and carefully observed traditions. But as an adult, he had spent years dismissing faith as superstition. Yet through the long journey of this investigation, something unexpected happened. When he honestly examined his own heart, he discovered something he hadn't anticipated. In his own quiet, reflective words, "I was shocked to realize that God had been there all along, just waiting for me to turn around and notice." Barry Schwarz never set out to prove anything about religion. He was simply a photographer who followed the evidence wherever it led, and that path took him somewhere modern science still struggles to explain. Somewhere that makes powerful institutions uneasy and raises questions many researchers are reluctant to ask out loud. The blood chemistry points to extreme physical trauma. The image itself still can't be explained by any known technology, and the unusual DNA findings. That's the part some scientists quietly admit is the hardest to make sense of. So, it all comes down to one big question. Is the Shroud of Turin genuine physical evidence connected to the resurrection? Or is it the most sophisticated artistic creation in human history, somehow made using methods we still can't identify or reproduce today? Either possibility carries enormous implications. I'd love to hear your honest thoughts. What do you believe after hearing this evidence? Share your perspective in the comments below. And if you're interested in more hidden history and mysteries that rarely get discussed in mainstream spaces, consider subscribing and turning on notifications because this is only the beginning.